Hey guys, welcome back for another installment of Heretic Chapter 2. I shook my head clear of the darker days behind me. Stupid flashbacks. I unslung the leaf blower, dropped it on the bench, wrestled my arms out of my technician's coveralls, and tied the sleeves around my waist, hoping the bundled fabric kept the .45 caliber pistol safely concealed. When you've been through what I've been through, you everyday carry no matter what. What are you doing? Tanaka asked, eyes wide with shock. Miri gave me a shocked expression from behind his protective arm. Jake? I hadn't gone 2 steps when the world jumped into action. Sirens blared. Cries for help were met by shouts to hold on. Footsteps pounded the pavement toward the crisis. I didn't have to look. Sometimes Boston gets a bad rap for being cruel, heartless. You can stuff that noise. We got a long history of banding together, too. In some cities, people look the other way when all hell's breaking loose. In Boston, we take care of our own. When our people hurt, the city, the whole entire city, answers. I reached the bus with a dozen other good Samaritans. Most were young professionals on their lunch breaks, but a couple were older staff nurses from our sister's sorrow. Those women assumed command readily, giving orders with perfect confidence they'd be followed. Volunteers ran survivors clear of danger and applied bandages from torn clothing. The veteran nurses tended to the more gravely wounded, tying tourniquets and starting CPR. Some people don't panic in a crisis. You typically find nurses leading those groups. "Over here!" a voice frantically shouted between coughs. I plucked a bandana from my back pocket and tied it around my face to protect my lungs. I followed the cries, scanning for fuel leaks, downed power lines, and other hazards. I crouched ran beneath the smog and knelt beside a smartly dressed woman. One of her pant legs was a tattered ruin from ankle to mid-thigh. The volunteer had propped her head up in her lap. The wounded woman shivered despite the July sun and fiercely clutched the volunteer's hand. A tight-lipped grimace dressed her face. "Her leg's pretty bad," the volunteer said, wide eyes drifting to an ugly gash just above the victim's right thigh. The volunteer had skin like fertile soil, and her shaved scalp gleamed with sweat. A backpack by her feet had a Harvard Medical School student ID clipped to a zipper. Her voice trembled. "She needs bandages." I yanked my belt free. "She's going to need more than that. Help me get this under her thigh." Med school eased the woman down, then gently lifted her leg. The older woman winced through a grimace, and little beads of sweat formed on her brow. I slid the belt under her leg and loosely cinched it. I brushed cold sweat from her face. "I'm sorry. This is going to hurt." The woman squeezed her eyes shut and gave a staccato of jerky nods with her chin. I nodded to the medical student and we shared a deep breath. I pulled the belt through, cinching the cracked leather as tightly as I could. Finally, the wounded woman's grimace broke. Her scream nearly knocked me over. I hated to do it, but sometimes you have to hurt people to help them. I recovered and grabbed Med School by the shoulder. She looked like a career in library sciences had suddenly become very appealing. "Hey." I flicked a glance at the ID on her backpack. "Regina." She regarded me like I was speaking Klingon. I locked gazes with her. "She's not out of it yet. Stay with her. As soon as you see the flashing lights, you grab somebody." Regina rubbed the back of her head. "I'm not going anywhere." She took the wounded woman's hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. I smiled and nodded. What'd I tell you? Boston, baby. "My son! Please, somebody help me!" I searched through the stinging smoke, but the chaos of scurrying volunteers and walking wounded made for one giant hellish nightmare. "Oh God, please," the man called. "Somebody help." I wiped my brow with the back of my hand. The smoke's bitter, diesel-scented taste was beginning to permeate my makeshift mask. I had to clear out soon or plan to stay a few days at the hospital myself. "Where are you?" I shouted. "Here. Oh, thank God," the man said with obvious relief. "We're here." I echolocated to the voice at the edge of the wrecked bus, and then I found them. He was early 20s, but a mask of soot made it hard to be sure. Tears dredged clean streaks from the corners of his eyes. He cradled a limp boy against his chest. A sandal dangled from a little foot. The world suddenly sounded garbled, like it was coming from an underwater speaker, except for one sound. One perfect sound. The giggle was perfection, personified. It was jubilant melody of a little girl laughing because she just opened the perfect birthday present. I shook off the memory, unable to afford reliving it just now. "Help my boy, please," the man said, voice cracking. His eyes welled. "He's all I got." I avoided looking at the boy's face. It would have been too much. If there's one thing I hate more than anything, more than terrorism or tax hikes, it's seeing kids get hurt. Not hurt like fell off a bike or sniffle sick, but hurt. Like really hurt. Cancer, domestic violence, or a darker hurt stemming from something that went bump in the night. "Set him down. Easy, easy," I said. "It's going to be okay." The man's lip quivered. Thank you so much." I kicked a clean patch in the debris and helped the terrified father lower his son to the pavement. I'd just dropped to a knee when Tanaka skidded to a halt behind me. What do we got? Tanaka asked. The resident's voice was steady, but his eyes darted around the chaos. Just getting started, Kenny, I said. Father hovered over son, chewing a knuckle while stroking the boy's face. Don't worry, he's a doctor. The man gave the funky-haired, jeans and t-shirt clad Tanaka a suspicious once-over and cocked an eyebrow. I winked at him. I promise. I flipped open my knife and quickly cut down the boy's Avengers t-shirt. Tanaka felt for a pulse and scanned the boy's limbs and trunk for injuries. He leaned on his haunches, face draining a color. I don't see anything, he said breathlessly. What? I asked. The bus had exploded, rolled 3 times. There was no way on earth the boy hadn't been hurt. I mean, I don't see anything. No cuts, no bruises, nothing, said Tanaka, panic rising in the resident's voice. He panned over the disaster. Nobody's walking away from this uninjured. Fear revealed a touch of Farsi. You must do something, Lufton. Please, I'm begging you. Tanaka hesitated. I saw the tires spinning in his mind. I pulled my keys from my pocket. Here. Tanaka took my keys and things clicked for him a second later. He flicked the mini flashlight on and flicked the beam over the boy's pupils. He regarded me and shook his head. Pupils are sluggish. Concussion? Maybe, I replied. The prickling at the back of my neck suggested otherwise. I learned to trust my gut a long time ago. I needed more information, and there was only one option for that. Those of us who hadn't been cut off from the essence during the Unity severance still had access to a vision beyond biological sight. It's been called many things. These days, true practitioners of the art know it as perception. Opening one's perception was no joke. It meant experiencing reality on a spectrum beyond most people's wildest dreams. It meant seeing the truth, which was why minor details like experience and training were vitally important. Using an untrained perception could permanently addle your mind with terror or blissfully lullaby you into an eternal dirt nap. I took a deep breath, refocusing my vision as my grandfather had taught me. Gold light flowed in, a liquid haze at the edges of my peripheral vision. I carefully kept my eyes low. I didn't want to see such a disaster on its full scale, what it might truly look like. I gazed upon the child, wishing instantly I hadn't. Acid stung my twisting stomach before ice-cold fury froze it in knots. His bare flesh had appeared unharmed to the uninitiated Dr. Tanaka, but I saw things differently, and it wasn't pretty. Beneath his tattered clothing, a tightly clustered patterns of needle-like wounds had rendered his skin swollen and bruised. I recognized the wounds and ground my teeth. Bite marks. A fate stealer. I'd seen similar wounds during my conscription with the Crimson Glaive. Actually, I'd seen every type of wound imaginable, trampling through the Foreverscape on Crimson Glaive orders. I'd seen horrors fighting in Fairy and in the vampire's realm of Nazgûl that'd turn your hair white. And don't get me started on the bloodbath at Avalon. Some things you can't unsee. Don't act so surprised. Of course those places are real. So are Olympus, Shangri-La, Jhana, Valhalla, and the places below. The Severance might have deleted a few critical system files in humanity's collective consciousness, but that didn't mean everything beyond our freshly restricted awareness had simply vanished. But back to the Fate Stealer. Fate Stealers are parasites. Instead of blood, the little monsters drain victims of potential, of hope, of ambition. The innocence of children and their willingness to rebuild castles after everything toppled down made them especially enticing. Fate Stealers are the worst kind of pests, and if I didn't stomp this one soon, the boy would be spending the rest of his life staring vacantly out a hospital window. I rotated the child's arm, inspecting the psychic wounds. Christ on a cross, what are you doing? Tanaka snarled. I already checked him. There's nothing we can do. We have to move on. There's always something, I growled back at him. Shut up and help me hold the boy down. I'm going to smite what's hurting this kid. I hesitated again. It isn't going to tickle. You're going to do what? Tanaka replied, incredulous and clearly not used to being barked at. Did you say smite? Never mind what I said. Just hold his ankles. I regarded the boy's father, hoping my expression was less terrified than his. This is going to sound insane, and I get that. But listen good. There's a parasite hiding somewhere in your son's spirit, I guess you could call it. If I can find it, I can kill it. I know it sounds crazy, but if we don't try... The man shook his head in disbelief and muttered something in Farsi. He looked to Tanaka for reassurance. That's when I saw it on Tanaka for the first time. The terrified look of a person snared by a riptide. Paralysis by analysis. He was out of his depth and hadn't a clue how deep the waters truly were. I felt for him. It's easy to forget how just starting out can feel. Sometimes you needed a jump start to snap you out of the funk. So I punched the doctor on the shoulder. Tanaka and I locked eyes. I spoke calmly. Listen to me. There's a little boy lying here who needs us. He will die if you keep up the human statue routine. Tanaka's eyes went shifty. He clutched his biceps. I was losing him. I seized him by the shoulder. Look at me. Look at me, Kenneth. It's time for the hero play. Tanaka took a couple of breaths and gently pinned the boy's ankles to the pavement. Petrified Dad knelt by his son's side, ready to restrain his arms. I gently rolled the boy's head to one side, and there it was. The Fate Stealer was a rat-sized blob of greasy fur, the greenish color of raw sewage. 6 pincher legs bit the boy's flesh on a psychic level, burying the parasite's horrid maw in deep for a feeding. The child lurched, and the Fate Stealer's bloated abdomen quivered in ecstasy. Son of a bitch. I called upon the essence, channeling the familiar sensation of warmth and purpose into my hands. My thoughts filled with a litany of words for banish, until the essence sat chambered in my mind like a magnum round. I glared at the Fate Stealer. Party's over. I placed one hand on the child's brow and the other over his heart. Release him, I said, fusing steel with gentle calm in my voice. I channeled the essence into the little body, jump-starting the soul that bastard Fate Stealer had siphoned nearly to zero. A hissing voice snarled through my perception. His being is mine, cleric. My skin crawled. It was like listening to a rattlesnake whisper in your ear. I'd never heard one speak before. If I ever heard one again, it'd be too soon. If you know what I am, you know I won't ask a second time. We all know who you are, Frostbite. We know what you've stolen as well. The rattlesnake voice hissed a creepy laughing sound. It made me want to puke. Frostbite wasn't the name you'd find on my driver's license or on my cable bill. My mind flashed to the leather pouch I'd hidden in my kitchen. How did some random bottom-feeding Fate Stealer know about the winter's bite? I readied my will for a death stroke. I said, my business with the Crimson Glade is exactly that. Mine. Probably best for the Unity to stay out of it. The boy twitched and the edge of my senses frayed. The Fate Stealer redoubled its efforts against my jump start, and our wills duked it out over the little boy's soul. The bastard laughed a cartoon weasel's wheezing snicker. I gritted my teeth. Banishing this piece of crap back to Fairy was going to sting. But you gotta do what you gotta do. You should have quit while you were ahead, I said, and slammed the full force of my essence-infused will into the boy's heart. Rabid flames scaled my spine, igniting every nerve along the way. Agony erupted between my ears, and I fell over, pretty sure my brain was melting. But the agony wasn't all mine. The Fate Stealer's rattlesnake voice screamed in pain along with me. Banish us, mortal, it matters little. We've fed enough this day. Your end approaches, the Fate Stealer said. The winter's bite shall be pried from your cold dead fingers, and the Unity shall take it in turn, unless she takes it first. The Fate Stealer squealed in agony a final time. I winced and peered at the little boy's neck. It was gone. I sat up and groaned at the myriad aches mauling my muscles. Dispelling magic isn't my strong suit, but you can't come nose to nose with something hurting a kid and turn a blind eye. It just wasn't my style. Between panting breaths, I fumbled through some mental math. The Fate Stealer had known about the winter's bite. Word apparently was out. The Crimson Glaive likely knew I'd snatched one of their most precious artifacts from right under their noses. Serves them right, the murderous pricks. Bluster aside, life was about to get complicated by a magnitude of about 1 billion very shortly. I cursed my luck, but I'd planned ahead like my grandfather had taught me. Always have an exit strategy. The boy sputtered and coughed. His father cradled him into his lap, kissing his forehead twice. Thank you. I don't know how you did it, but truly God has worked his will through you. He grabbed my hand and gave it a vigorous shake. When next we meet, perhaps I'll be able to balance the scales. You don't have to thank me. I'm sure you'd have done the same, I said. A little girl's giggle sounded in the back of my mind again. But we'll never know. Oh my God, Jake, Kenny. Mary swam through a throng of EMTs and police officers. Her face was smudged with soot and sweat stains, and her ponytail had fallen out. Flecks of blood dotted her scrub top. She slammed into Kenny and buried her face in his chest. It's awful. She subdued a cry. An emergency crew arrived, wheeling a stretcher. They buckled the boy in, and I silently wished him well. Exhaustion suddenly felt right around the corner. I looked at Kenny and Miri. We should head inside. Administration is going to want us. Kenny snapped so loud the EMTs looked up from their patient. What us? There is no us. You're a janitor, Winters, a high school dropout janitor. He slipped from Miri's grasp and stepped close enough to nearly press our noses together. I don't know how you did it, but I'm not down for you making a fool out of me like that. You must have set that little act up ahead of time. My jaw set like steel. Little act? People are dead and you think this was all an act? Tanaka shoved me back a step. You're damn right I do. A lone wolf's distant howl pierced my thoughts. I caught myself channeling the essence for a counterstrike, but then I let the impulse pass. Tanaka was just scared. I didn't really want to hurt him, and since his family's name was on at least 2 wings of our sister's sorrow, I was pretty sure I didn't want to make an actual enemy out of him. Kenny, stop, Miri said. She stepped between us and planted her hands on Kenny's chest. Jake's right. They need us inside. All of us. Tanaka gave me a final glare that might have been intimidating when I was 9. I let him have his moment and started for the hospital's entrance. Yeah, I thought so, Tanaka grunted. I clenched my fist but kept moving. A husky voice called for people to clear the way. I obliged, allowing the EMTs to pass with their occupied stretcher. One of them hovered over the gurney as he ran, checking vital signs, but I caught a glimpse of the patient. A little boy. I searched for his father. It took a second, but I found him yelling at an impeccably dressed man standing beside a sleek Mercedes just outside the accident scene. He slapped the man right across his face, then climbed into the luxury vehicle. They vanished into traffic a second later. I scratched the back of my head. Who would leave their child unattended under these circumstances? That didn't add up. My eyes stung. My muscles ached. A bus exploding less than 50 yards from the hospital's front door meant rack time in the foreseeable future would be exactly 0. There was a metric ton of work to do. Oh, and the icing on top of the crap cake? If the fate stealer had spoken the truth, I'd just earned wanted fugitive status.